Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Liz Schreier. I am honored to be the president and CEO of the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, and on behalf of the USGLC, USAID, so many agencies, private sector partners that are joined together here in support of the purpose, the power, and the impact of Feed the Future. Welcome to what is going to be a spectacular morning together. Now, whether you are here in this room on Capitol Hill, or you are joining us live in the live stream from across the country or across the globe, I think we are here for what is going to be one of those moments that, if I am right, and I think I am, that together we are going to make the world a better, safer, and more prosperous place. Now, how do I know that? Because USGLC and many in this room had a front row seat when it comes to Feed the Future. 15 years ago, I, along with probably a lot of you, were privileged to actually be in the room when Feed the Future was launched. So not unlike today, it was a time when there was great global crisis and threats to global food security. Leaders at that time from the government and the private sector stepped up, and they responded with this program, which has had remarkable success, to launch the next chapter of the signature Interagency Global Hunger Initiative, the Feed the Future Accelerator, that will drive a new regional agenda in Southern and Eastern Africa that promotes global food security, advances global stability, and makes a difference at our kitchen table here at home in America. Now, I'm so pleased. I'm looking around this room. I see so many friends that have joined us, representatives from Capitol Hill, dozens of government agencies, friends from foreign diplomats, business, humanitarian organizations, friends from the Feed the Future Innovation Labs from across the country. There are amazing speakers that are going to join us up on the podium and panel conversations, and my job is just to play the MC role and move them in and off the stage, and we are starting with an incredible, incredible friend, and the perfect one to kick off this conversation. All of you know him. It is a friend of USAID's and USGLC, Senator Chris Coons from the great state of Delaware. Now, all of you know him as the chairman, probably know him, as the chairman of the State Foreign Operations Subcommittee, a senior member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Coons, we all know you as the champion of so many issues, but what I certainly know is that when it comes to the complexity of global hunger, of fighting for making sure that there is to address global food security, you don't just roll up your sleeves, but you are the champion. You are one of the most important voices on this issue, and there's no one we'd rather have kick off today's conversation than our dear, dear friend, Senator Chris Coons.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Liz. Thank you for everything that USGLC does to bring us together for purposeful conversations across the United States that help reinforce the concept that our national security, our profile in terms of development and diplomacy, our economic engagement at home and abroad all have to work together and have to not just recognize each other's existence, not just occasionally shake hands, but actually integrate together. That's underlaying a lot of my work in foreign policy. I spent 8 years in the private sector for a global company before I came into politics, and the power and the strength and the reach of the private sector and the ways in which private sector approaches can inform and streamline our approaches in development, and then the ways that the public sector brings different values and different priorities and different resources to the global work that this is principally about, has been one of the core things that I've dedicated my time to in my brief 14 years here in the U.S. Senate. So I am thrilled to be with you for the launch of Feed the Future's Accelerator, which is intended to accelerate exactly that point, which is the importance in countries like Zambia, like Malawi, like Tanzania, of accelerating focus on bringing together private sector partners, public sector partners, NGO partners, and our development partners in making transformational investments in national systems of agriculture. As Liz just reminded us, Feed the Future as an AID initiative was born out of a global food crisis 15 years ago. And as a new member of the Foreign Relations Committee, I believe with Chairman Corker, if I'm not mistaken, I also was in the room for conversations about the importance of long-term investments in transforming agriculture, bringing the private sector in to bear to tackle hunger and malnutrition and extreme poverty. Combating food insecurity is something on which Democrats and Republicans agree. Recognizing that food insecurity, that hunger is a national security issue, is a stability issue, as well as a humanitarian issue and profoundly a moral issue, is something on which dear friends like John Bozeman and David Beasley and I have not just agreed, but worked very hard. And seeing that we need Congress engaged, that this can't just be an initiative of the administration, but it needs to be authorized and funded by Congress, is part of what led me to be an early co-sponsor of the Global Food Security Act in 2016, signed into law in 2018, reauthorized in 22. Sharpening it and focusing it to prioritize smallholder farmers, to prioritize the critical role of women and girls in changing agricultural practices has been a key part of my work in this area. And now as the chair of the State and Foreign Operations Appropriations Subcommittee, I've worked with my good friend and partner, Senator Lindsey Graham, to make sure that Feed the Future has $1 billion in this year's appropriations bill. That deserves a round of applause. In a time of constrained budgets, we have to continue to show purpose, determination, a willingness to be flexible and accountable, and to make our dollars go farther. It is heartbreaking that now more people are hungry than ever. It is the result of conflict, of climate, of migration, of destabilization, and as we've seen, we need to do more, and we need to do it smarter. And the way to do more and do it smarter is to figure out ways that we can leverage the strength of our partnerships, engage our other development partners, and engage the private sector. I'm thrilled that the 3 countries that have been chosen for the first application of this accelerator are countries I've been to repeatedly, countries where I've recently had the chance to see the national leadership, our talented ambassadors, and the change that is underway on the ground, and where we can see it happen at scale. The concept of a renewed breadbasket for Southern and Eastern Africa in these 3 focus countries excites me, and the prospects of this accelerator demonstrating what is possible in food security excites me even more. I'll close with this. Senator Bozeman, Senator Graham, and I are hard at work on a bipartisan bill to authorize a public-private foundation to further accelerate the work of Feed the Future. I look forward to our moving that in the next Congress, and it is intended to complement, not supplement in any way, USAID's Feed the Future Accelerator. That's the principal driver of success in this area and in this region, and I am so excited to support it and grateful for the leadership of USAID in this initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Coons, as always. What I love about what I get to do today is I get to thank and introduce so many wonderful friends, and I'm privileged to welcome to the podium Senator John Bozeman of Arkansas, who, as many of you probably know, is the top Republican in the Agriculture Committee and a senior member on the Appropriator, who sits not far from Senator Coons on the State Foreign Operations Subcommittee, and has distinguished himself as a key voice on the importance of America's role in the world, particularly on the issue we're talking about today in terms of addressing global hunger. He has served as the past co-chair of the Global Hunger Caucus. One of his many, many accomplishments is Senator Bozeman was instrumental in securing the bipartisan passage of the 2022 Global Food Security Act, which of course reauthorized the Feed the Future for another 5 years. And I would just close to introduce him. I had the privilege of joining the senator in Little Rock, Arkansas not long ago, and I could see with his constituents in a town hall meeting with Governor Beasley, and I can tell you he brings that same passion to fighting global hunger in Washington on Capitol Hill as he does with his constituents, and they are as grateful and appreciative of what we feel here back home. Please welcome Senator John Bozeman.
Well, you left out the Women's Empowerment Act, which how can we forget? We worked on that for a couple of years. These things it doesn't matter how right things are or how useful or whatever, it just takes a long time to get things done. But that was remarkable. Ivanka saw the bill after we introduced it and decided, that was a very good thing. She got really involved to the point that she assigned a team to help us get it passed. And literally, you all were on conference calls with her every day, or her team in my office. And I remember that we were working hard on this thing, and her husband was working on criminal reform. And so she called me one night, and she said, "John, I'm sitting here watching the television, and I see that the criminal reform bill has just passed. When are we going to pass our bill?" I said, "Don't worry, we're going to get it passed." But anyway, I'm here I think Chris did a tremendous job of summing up what's going on in Congress. I really shouldn't be here. It's so busy right now, and he had to sneak right out. Everybody's in town. We're trying to get this continuing resolution done. So I was wavering a little bit. My chief of staff, Tony Maurice, told me to get over here. Samantha said, "Get over here." Liz said, "Get over here." So how do you not do that? But anyway, I appreciate you all. This is the who's who of movers and shakers. We're working really hard to get a farm bill passed right now, which all of this ties together. And I was giving a presentation to the Republican caucus about several months ago about the importance of the farm bill and all of these things. And Marco Rubio was sitting by me, and I get done, and I said, "Here she is. I was here before you." Marco Rubio was sitting by me, and he said, "John," he said, I asked if there's any questions, and there weren't any. And Marco said, "John, tell them," this is our head of intelligence on the Intelligence Committee, our representative. He said, "Tell them that food security is national security." We bandy that around so much, but you look at the Arab Spring, that's about hungry people. You look at all, so many of the events that have happened, again, are about hungry people. So I appreciate the fact that you're working really hard, Samantha, to be innovative. We're in a changing world. We've got a lot of good programs, but we constantly, and government's not very good about doing this. We can legislate changes, but it takes a long time. But Samantha's jumped out and done some major changes that I think are going to be really beneficial as we go forward. And we certainly are going to support her with that. So again, thank you all for all that you do. Anything we can do, be sure and let us know. And put the farm bill on your prayer list. Cross your fingers and toes. That's something that's really important. The other thing that's going to be important, I think, right now, because of the dire straits of our farm economy, when you talk to our farmers, because input costs are so high, commodity prices are so low, we're talking about like 1980s situation, our farmers are losing a lot of money. So we're going to have to help them in that regard. So thank you all. We do appreciate you. So vote.
Everybody in this room knows that the world is complicated. And there are so many other pulls and tugs on his time. But Jake has chosen to be here today, chosen to be and prioritize this moment because he cares so deeply about the fight for global hunger and to lift up the innovative launch to address global food security. What does that mean? It means that it speaks to who he is and about his values. So Jake, thank you for standing up and for speaking out and for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan.
So good morning, everyone, and let me start by saying thank you for that very kind introduction, Liz. I have a new career, which is as the warm-up act to Samantha Power. Yesterday, I got to speak just before her at the launch of the Global Development Strategy, and I did such a good job, they invited me back today to go before her in speaking about Feed the Future and the work that's being done by everybody in this room and beyond, because this really has been a team effort. And speaking of team efforts, It's been a bipartisan effort. You just heard from Senator Boozman, before that from Senator Coons. And it goes to show you that this is something that doesn't see politics or party. The fight to end global hunger and to address the acute needs in all their dimensions globally is truly something that we can all pull together as Americans and as partners around the world to deal with. And so I'm grateful to the ambassadors, the business leaders, the colleagues across Congress, across civil society, across the U.S. government for all of the work you're doing on this front. And I'm grateful for you guys allowing me to say a few words this morning. I was actually at the State Department working for Secretary Clinton when Feed the Future was launched, was conceived as a, at state, at USAID, and other parts of the U.S. government and civil society. So I've watched this program from its inception through to where it is today, and now with this event, how we can project out into the future to be even more impactful as we go forward. And I will say that since the earliest days of the administration, President Biden has been focused on this question of hunger and its impact on so many dimensions of human life and of our national security. He uses this refrain often. He says it to us privately. He's spoken about it publicly, that if parents cannot feed their children, nothing else matters. And he's right. If parents can't feed their children, our investments in reducing poverty, in increasing access to education, in trying to strengthen our global health systems, all of those efforts will come for naught. Our efforts to achieve stability and security in communities and countries around the world will be undercut. And our own national security will be impaired. And so that's why when President Biden was vice president, he played a critical role in helping launch Feed the Future. And it's why he's led the fight against global hunger since the first day of the Biden-Harris administration. We have invested over $20 billion to fight global hunger. We've launched a new strategic partnership with the African Union to accelerate food production and investments in agricultural infrastructure. And we've brought the world together to help communities hardest hit by food insecurity and shocks, including rallying more than 100 countries to endorse the UN roadmap for global food security. Because the bottom line is, as you all know better than I do, the United States cannot and should not tackle this challenge alone, especially now. And I want to take a moment to explain why. Over the last few years, the combination of COVID and conflicts and climate change has eroded decades of forward progress on food security. Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine not only led to the highest recorded food prices in history, it also exposed the world's reliance on a handful of breadbaskets that leave hundreds of millions of people vulnerable, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa. The pandemic also caused food prices to soar and food staples to become scarce, plunging more than 750 million people into chronic hunger. And every day, all around the world, more droughts and more floods are leaving farmers with less to sell and less to eat. So taken together, these challenges have compounded the global food crisis. And they've exposed realities that demand new strategies and solutions to achieve the same goals we've always had: end acute food insecurity, reduce chronic hunger and malnutrition, and help ensure that parents around the world can feed their children. Same goals, new approach. That's the core of the Feed the Future Accelerator that we're launching today, one that can be boiled down to two main lines of effort. First, concentrate on catalytic investments. This is something that Samantha Power talks about all the time and is at the core of this accelerator concept. And second, increase sustainability. Let me say a brief word about each of these two core pillars. First, concentrating on catalytic investments. As everyone here knows well, we have a finite number of resources. So we need to focus our investments in seeds, in fertilizer, in irrigation, in roads, where they will have the greatest impact. That's why our accelerator will focus $80 million in new Feed the Future funding on 3 countries: Malawi, Tanzania, and Zambia. Africa writ large has enormous untapped potential to address food insecurity. It's home to more than 60% of the world's unused arable farmland. And Malawi, Tanzania, and Zambia are especially well positioned to drive agricultural growth. They have the natural endowments, they have enviable locations, and they have the government buy-in to enact policies that will help attract private sector investment and increase trade across the region and ultimately around the world. It will take time, there's no doubt. It will take effort. But these three countries and our investments can create food sources closer to the people who need it the most. They can reduce dependencies on volatile supply chains, and they'll have the greatest impact on reducing poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. Second, increasing sustainability. The accelerator will respond to immediate needs, but the goal is also to spur sustainable long-term production of food that is nutritious, affordable, and safe. That requires climate-resilient seeds. It requires effective fertilizers, and it requires access to markets. And one thing is central to all these requirements: infrastructure. That is what will enable Malawi, Tanzania, and Zambia to transport food across the region. That is what will help expand markets, and that is what will help ensure sustainable, resilient, and impactful food production. So infrastructure is going to be a key focus of this accelerator, from roads to irrigation to grain storage and beyond. And I'm proud of the work that we've already begun to do on this front. 2 years ago, we launched the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, or PGI, with our G7 partners. And the goal was to mobilize hundreds of billions of dollars of investments to close the infrastructure gap in low and middle income countries. The goal was to make these investments transparent, to be driven by local needs, and developed with our partners, not imposed upon them from start to finish, developed with our partners. And they're delivering results. We see it in the very countries that are the focus of the accelerator announcement today. For example, across the Lobito corridor in Africa, we've mobilized more than $1 billion for railway lines that will extend from Angola on the west coast across the DRC, Zambia, and ultimately Tanzania, connecting the continent from east to west, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean. This is the biggest American rail investment in Africa ever. One that will be a game changer for food security in the region because it will allow the development of these unused arable lands in the center of the continent, in Zambia and Tanzania and other countries, to get to market in a way that also can replenish the needs and the economic growth of that part of the African continent. And it will maximize the results of our Feed the Future Accelerator, from reducing food transportation costs to creating new food supply chains to increasing incomes for small and medium-sized farm holders. Now, I know that Administrator Power will come up here and do a better job of explaining and providing the vision and the substance for the accelerator. And I know that we will have a great panel of leaders discussing the accelerator in more depth. So let me stop talking and just close with this. Since day one of this administration, nearly 4 years ago, President Biden has made another thing clear to his entire national security team, and that is that our world stands at an inflection point, a point where the decisions we make now in the next year, 2, 3, 4 years are going to determine the course of the next 2, 3, 4 decades. I believe our decision today to launch the Feed the Future Accelerator will set that course on a fundamentally more secure and more prosperous outcome for generations to come. So thank you all again for your partnership. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for the contributions you are making, because it is what has made this event today, this effort today, and this work we do together going forward possible. And I look forward to doing that work with you. Thank you very much.
I would say that's quite a warm-up act. You did all right. So now, none of this happens, honestly, without USAID. They've been an amazing partner. They are the driver of everything we're talking about today. So for the visionary, the driver, as I said, the implementer, the convener, shall I say the power behind all of this, our USGLC 2022 honoree, please welcome a partner, a friend of all of ours, the USAID administrator, to fill in the details of the accelerator. Samantha, Administrator Power, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to see such a full house and such energy in the house. I want to thank Jake to start for being such a tremendous partner and really a visionary and someone who just understands in his very core the core argument that Senator Boozman made, which is food security is national security. The National Security Advisor's time is precious. There are a few things going on in the world right now you might have noticed, but Jake is here, and Jake was here yesterday as well for the launch of the Global Development Strategy. We're just so grateful to you, Jake, for driving this agenda, and the President's Global Infrastructure Initiative and that game-changing effort, which will bear fruit not only this year, next year, but decades into the future, is going to have some of the most profound effects on food security on the continent, I think, than we have ever seen. So thank you as well for shepherding that and bringing it to where we have taken it so far. And of course, we can use support up here on Capitol Hill for those efforts and those investments in infrastructure. And so it's great to see such a bipartisan delegation here. Senator Boozman, Senator Coons, thank you for making time. I will say that anytime you can get John Boozman, Jake Sullivan, David Beasley, Chris Coons, Tracy Mann, Gregory Meeks, leading lights from the private sector who will come to leading lights from academia, some of the sharpest minds on food security, on national security, on Capitol Hill together at a busy time in one room, you know that at least one of two things is going on. Either Liz Schreier is involved, or we are talking about a very, very big deal. And in this case, it's both. Liz, thank you so much for your leadership in strengthening and expanding, always seeking to expand the bipartisanship behind America's good work around the world, and just intuiting and convincing so many about the inextricable links, again, between our security and the kinds of investments that we are making. Senator Coons, specifically as our appropriator in chief, just thank you for immersing yourself in the programs. And I watch you on C-SPAN. I watch too much C-SPAN, and I watch him cornering his colleagues and nerding out and hoping that they are as interested as he is in the fine details. But we really are just so lucky to have you as a champion and somebody who is so immersed in this. And Senator Boozman, thank you for being here and changing your plans to be here and to show how much you value both, I think, Africa and food security. You're an amazing partner. Special thanks to Ambassador Suka Mafudze, who's here, Ambassador Kanza, Deputy Chief of Mission Banda, and Economic Counselor Mulenga for your partnership and for joining us today. Recently, and this will come as no surprise to anybody who happens to know about my borderline obsessive love of baseball, I found myself thinking about Moneyball. Moneyball, the book and later the movie that you might remember about the 2002 Oakland A's baseball team. After a few middling seasons, you remember, the team develops a brilliant new strategy, rigorously analyzing player performance data that everybody else has been ignoring to determine how they can use the resources that they have to build a roster that will deliver outsized returns. And in the end, this team that everybody had written off wins their division and actually just transforms, to this day, the way professional baseball teams do their business and approach building their rosters. That is, I know it's a stretched analogy, perhaps for some, but as you hear more, you'll understand why the analogy actually works. This is exactly the type of success story we are hoping to write with Feed the Future. We know that when we make small, targeted investments, we can transform entire food systems. You really, have done this before in places like Brazil, which was struggling to feed its rapidly growing population back in the 1970s, when it worked with USAID to launch a massive effort to boost agricultural productivity. Today, thanks to the hard work of Brazilians and the vision there, Brazil not only has a secure food supply for its own people, but is in fact the world's third largest food exporter, helping to feed hungry people in other places. But we have limited resources at our disposal to spur similar transformations. Feed the Future has been incredibly successful, helping to cut poverty by an average of 20 to 25% in its areas of focus just in this first decade that we are just concluding. But Feed the Future's base budget has not changed since it was launched back in 2010. And when you think, again, about prices generally, you'll see what that means for work being done out in the world. And last year, notwithstanding the efforts of Senator Coons and others, Feed the Future's budget was actually cut by more than 4%, despite what Jake described, of course, the growing global needs, the shocks caused by the pandemic, Putin's invasion, the changing climate, among other factors. Every day there's a new shock, so much that the word shock, it seems like we need a new word, right? Because how does it shock when shocking. Congress has leapt into action in response to these specific new crises, very specifically, of course, on Ukraine, but also Congress recognizing the ripple effects, the cascading effects from Putin's invasion on Africa and on food security more broadly. And so the approval of these really generous supplemental packages with such strong bipartisan support has been absolutely key. But we can't rely on emergency supplemental funding for our long-term plans to tackle global hunger. That is why we need a Moneyball strategy for Feed the Future, to strategically deploy the resources that we have to spur the transformation that we know is needed. And that is exactly what the Feed the Future Accelerator is going to do. We have run the numbers, and we are placing bets on 3 countries that have both high need and extraordinary potential to increase agricultural productivity. Malawi, Tanzania, and Zambia are ripe for the kind of agricultural transformations we saw in countries like Brazil and India and South Korea. Efforts that lift millions out of poverty and can help stabilize the food supply for entire regions. One reason why this is the case is that the type of farming system that is prevalent in these countries, maize mixed, for those agriculture nerds among you, has incredibly high potential for increased production. Right now, smallholder farmers in those countries are lucky to see maize yields of 2 tons per hectare, whereas in the United States, our farmers average over 10 tons per hectare. The governments in these countries also have laid out a vision for themselves to become part of a regional agricultural powerhouse, and they have committed to leading the way to make it a reality. It is important to note that all 3 of these countries are members of what we call our Democracy Delivers initiative, which pays extra attention to those countries experiencing democratic openings, where there are high-level commitments to reform, sometimes staggered roads and fits and starts to achieving those reforms, but nonetheless, leaders who have committed to making reforms to better address their people's most pressing needs. Finally, as Jake mentioned, our investments in the Libido corridor align perfectly, helping to build the hard infrastructure that farmers need to receive affordable agricultural inputs, and then, again, as Jake spoke to, transport what they grow to markets across the region. So, as Jake has said, we are concentrating $80 million of new Feed the Future funding in these 3 countries. We will use our know-how, our farmer-to-farmer connections, the improved seed varieties that have been brought online, and modern and ever-refining fertilizer application techniques to help farmers both raise their maize yields and plant other crops along with maize that strengthen their soils and boost nutrition. Our analysis shows that U.S. investments totaling $80 million per year for 3 years would lift 400,000 people out of poverty and spare an additional 550,000 people from the chronic hunger that we have seen afflicting so many in these countries. We anticipate that we have the potential to boost their combined GDP by $411 million over the same period, and agricultural yields should skyrocket, potentially increasing corn harvests by up to 1.5 million metric tons per year, and bean harvests by 155,000 metric tons per year. Outcomes like these are life-changing, and they actually, what I've just described, probably undersells the impact. Feed the Future's work is going to build on nearly $500 million of other existing U.S. government investment from the Development Finance Corporation, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of State's Vision for Adapted Crops and Soils, and the Millennium Challenge Corporation. I think Alice Albright is here somewhere today. Yes, right in front of me. Thank you so much, Alice, for everything you and MCC are doing in this space. At the same time, Jake talked about how important it is to be catalytic. Leading global and local companies are seeing this opportunity, and as a result, are investing a collective $150 million of their own money in food systems across these 3 accelerator countries. And we hope that this is only going to snowball, and we expect it will. OFI is here. They are one of the largest coffee suppliers in the world, a key partner to Starbucks and JDE Peet's, and they are preparing to invest $80 million in coffee supply chains in Tanzania and Zambia over the next 4 years. Pyxus, who I saw in action in Malawi, the U.S. agricultural company, is investing $30 million in Malawi to support groundnut production. Cargill is here. They are supporting production and consumption of nutrition-rich sweet potato in Tanzania. Acumen, the impact investing fund, is with us. They are dedicating more than $6 million to expanding access to clean energy in remote areas. And Bayer is here and working with us closely, and I'm not going to spoil it. We will hear what they've got in store shortly. This tidal wave of support and investment draws in other types of partners as well. Donor countries, NGOs. One example is our work with the government of Ireland, who I want to give a particular and not biased shout out to, which has already joined the United States in making a combined $75 million investment in Malawi's food systems. And now we are expanding the U.S.-Ireland collaboration into Zambia, working together to tackle undernutrition and to build climate resilience. And I have to say to the Irish government, just to see Ireland pushing operating so above its weight for such a small country to be making such substantial investments, particularly as a percentage of GDP, it really helps us in our other donor engagements to try to crowd in others. So thank you in more ways than one. You can see that by identifying where our dollars are going the furthest, making a big bet on that potential, and then encouraging others to embrace the same transformative vision, we are able to amplify our investment many times over. And we know up here on Capitol Hill that we have a responsibility to amplify our investment many times over. Together, we will create an engine that can help feed hungry people, not just in these 3 countries, but across the African continent. And that is the kind of long-term resilience that will reduce pressure on the U.S. taxpayer to fund constant emergency responses, and it will free up our dollars to catalyze even more of these sustainable development transformations around the world. This new Feed the Future Accelerator strategy is the product of serious reflection and rigorous analysis. We believe that it can mark a turning point in our fight against global hunger. Thank you so much for being a part of it and for all you do. Thank you.
Based on what we just heard, I think you can understand why I earlier said this is a moment we will all feel very proud that we were in the room. We're now going to have a chance to hear from a series of people that can really give light of how this is going to have a transformational effect.
Mrs. Liz Schreier, President and the CEO, U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, the Honorable Senator Christopher Coons, the Honorable Senator John Boozman, the Honorable Jake Sullivan, U.S. National Security Advisor, the Honorable Samantha Power, Administrator of the USAID, honorable members of both houses of the U.S. and Congress, distinguished members of the U.S. government, the Board of Directors of the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Your Excellencies, I bring you warm greetings from H.E. Musafaki Mahamat, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, and from H.E. Ambassador Josepha Sako, the Commissioner for Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, and Sustainable Development. Thank you so much for inviting the African Union to be part of this important event as you launch the Feed the Future's Accelerator in Sub-Saharan Africa. I'm pleased that H.E. Marie Antoinette Rose Carter, the newly appointed CEO of the African Peer Review Mechanism, a key organ of the African Union that promotes governance on the continent of Africa, is among us this morning to celebrate this important event. I want to seize this opportunity to commend the excellent work accomplished by the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition in the promotion of a more peaceful, prosperous world where the U.S. plays an instrumental role in the provision of the global public goods. The African Union values the strategic partnership with the U.S. government and is grateful for the bipartisan and bicameral support that Africa has always enjoyed. Through USAID, the U.S. government has been the strongest supporter to Africa's comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program, CADIP. This partnership spans 2 decades, starting in 2003, when the CADIP agenda was adopted by the African Union heads of state and the government in Maputo, Mozambique. Over the last 2 decades, a lot of progress has been achieved under CADIP. Government expenditure in agriculture has more than doubled. Although the target of spending 10% in agriculture has not been achieved. Intra-Africa trade in agricultural goods and services is increased, and we expect it to expand more under the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA. The African Union has established a robust monitoring and reporting mechanism. Since 2017, the African Union has been monitoring the progress that AU member states have been making in the implementation of the CADIP agenda through the biennial review report. The report has become the authoritative reference to anyone interested in understanding the progress in agriculture transformation in Africa. Currently, CADIP is implemented under the Malabo Declaration that was adopted in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea in 2014. This declaration will expire at the end of December 2025. The African Union has just completed drafting the successor 10-year CADIP strategy and action plan 2026 to 2035. The draft strategy and action plan, shifting from an agriculture-led strategy to an agri-food systems approach, considering the emerging trends, rising incomes, and an expanding middle class across the continent, population growth that is expected to reach 2.5 billion people by 2050, rapid urbanization, and the changing consumer habits towards processed foods, growing agro-processing of agricultural products, especially staple foods. In the development of the CADIP strategy and action plan, The US government has contributed significantly through USAID, and the African Union received US $3 million from the US Congress supplement funding to support the post-Malabo Cardiff process. We really appreciate. These resources were used to undertake two work streams: stakeholder consultations in the 5 AU regions led by the regional economic communities, the research and analysis around 13 thematic areas led by Africa Centers of Expertise. The reports from two work streams were used to draft the strategy and action plan. We are grateful for this generous support from the American people. The 10-year Cardiff strategy and action plan has 6 strategic objectives: intensify sustainable food production, agro-industrialization and trade, boost investment and financing in transforming agri-food systems by both the public and private sectors, ensure food security and nutrition across the continent for a healthy and a productive population, advance inclusivity, women and youth, and equitable livelihoods in agriculture food system value chains. Number 5, build resilient agri-food systems that can withstand and adapt to various shocks and stressors. 6, strengthen agri-food systems governance to improve leadership, policy coherence, and mutual accountability. The Cardiff Strategy and Action Plan 2026 to 2035, together with the draft Kampala Cardiff Declaration, will be presented at an extraordinary session of the African Union Assembly in Kampala, Uganda, in January 2025 for consideration and adoption. The launch of the Feed the Future's Accelerator in Sub-Saharan Africa is timely. It is coinciding with the continent's formation of the 10-year Cardiff Strategy and Action Plan. During its implementation, we look forward to strengthening our partnership with the various agencies of the US government, in particular USAID and the USDA, with whom we have long-standing collaboration and cooperation. We take note of the choice of the 3 focus countries. Malawi, by the way, I served in Malawi as ambassador of my country to Malawi. I'm very happy for that. Tanzania and Zambia, 2 of which are going through a very tough drought. I hope that some of the resources under the Accelerator program will be used to address the immediate needs of the people in those countries, but mainly on long-term investments that will help to build resilient agriculture systems. Investments will be needed in 2 critical areas: water for agriculture and the seed systems. I thank you very much for listening. Asante sana.
Please come sit. Thank you, Madam Ambassador, for your partnership and for your words. Welcome to our panelists. Wow, I hit the jackpot. We have a power panel to learn from and to engage and to really understand how this is going to work. I have to start with my friend, Governor Beasley. You ran the World Food Program. There are, during a time of perhaps what some have called the worst global humanitarian crisis since World War II. So you and I have talked a ton. Why don't we start with kind of how this accelerator fits in to the crisis that every speaker has talked about in terms of food insecurity today? Where are we? Set the scene of how you see the Feed the Future Accelerator fitting into the crisis at the moment. Welcome.
Liz, thank you. And it's absolutely critical and essential because we're not going to move in the right direction without operations like this, the Accelerator, because it gets to the root core of the problem. When you think about 200 years ago, there was a population of 1.1 billion, and literally 90 to 95% of the people on the planet were in extreme poverty. And we reached to now a population almost 8 billion, less than 10%. So we've made progress, incredible progress, because of systems, institutions, and programs. But we're now going backwards. Like Jake said and Samantha said, because of climate shocks, because of conflict, and we can go on, and shocks like COVID, and we can continue to talk about the Ukraine, the breadbasket. And so now, when I took this role, I was thinking I could put the World Food Program out of business. I mean, why couldn't we? All the technology, all the advancements, and boom, we went from 80 million people marching towards starvation to now 350 million people because of what we were just talking about. But in every area where we had accelerator-type programs, where we were giving the farmers, the smallholder farmers, the tools they needed, and particularly women. You don't have to go to Harvard Business School to teach an African woman about capitalism and success. You give an African woman the tools she needs, it's absolutely remarkable. I have seen it from country to country to country. And in those places where you have resilience and sustainability programs, you don't need additional aid and support. It's absolutely a tax-saving response for the American taxpayer, for the Bundestag. I can go on and on. So great progress.
You just mentioned Ukraine. You understand this breadbasket concept. Yeah. How do you see this breadbasket concept on the accelerator?
Well, it's absolutely essential. If we can have the accelerator be more strategic with the funding that is necessary, because the breadbasket, like Ukraine, when you took a country that grew enough food to feed 400 million people, and all of a sudden it's derailed.
Take it out of the system.
Yeah. So countries, this is why I did that tweet that was heard around the world to Putin. You're bringing famine and catastrophe to the rest of the world, especially Africa. And so I was trying to ignite the African leaders to bring pressure on Putin because the whole world was vulnerable to the breadbasket of the world. And if we have accelerators with success in countries like in Africa, you're less vulnerable to rogue nations and these types of catastrophes that come on top of COVID and climate shocks and conflict that we've been facing over and over, compounded. And what we're facing right now, Liz, it's getting worse. Unfortunately, the media is so properly obsessed on Gaza and Ukraine, but we are absolutely not telling the world how many starving children there are in Sahel, in Sub-Saharan, and around the world.
So Agnes, let me go to you. So we're looking at Malawi, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe, and Zambia. So 2 questions. Why now? Why is it so important? I think Governor Beasley just set it up. And how does this impact smallholder farmers, which you know as well as anybody? Help us understand, bring it back down to that level.
Thank you. Good to see you, Samantha. And I just want to appreciate, 2 weeks ago, you were in Kigali, dinner with over 60 people from USAID just to support what is going on the ground in Africa through the Africa Food Systems Forum. There we saw a number of things. One, we have a number of SMEs on the African continent that are driving growth in new ways, in ways that we have not seen before. And let's be clear, this is not by accident. This is because of the investments that have happened before. I keep saying that the African model is beginning to work. Smallholder farmers, small businesses, attracting large businesses. So that's number one. Number two, all the stars are aligning in a way. Look at Southern Africa. All the 3 countries that were selected, the leadership is incredible. The government of Tanzania, the president of Tanzania, in the little time she's been in place, has tripled the agricultural budget. You will see the same thing in Malawi. You will see the same thing in Zambia. Despite the struggles, they are mobilizing people in new ways. Number 3, the shocks that you talked about, Samantha, are beginning to help people understand that agriculture is the neglected potential that they've never exploited for the communities that we work for. And they are beginning to align behind this potential. Number 4, here in this room, we are also recognizing and aligning to this potential. So to me, the why now is all those things. Now, let me paint a picture of what this translates into at the farm level. We've made an investment of $9 million, Feed the Future money, in a community in Tanzania through what we call rural platforms, where we bring private sector, all the businesses together. With that money, we were able to unlock $110 million of private sector money. We were able to reach 720,000 farmers. But let me tell you what that does to the farmer. For the farmer, if you produce 5 metric tons of maize, where you were producing one metric ton, that means the difference between, and this is what they tell us, I'm able to send my kids to a private school. As a kid who grew up from farmers' savings, I know exactly what that means. But this is happening.
It's transformation.
Huge transformation. And these people are exporting food to South Sudan. They are now supporting Zambia during this drought that they have. So Tanzania is basically the breadbasket in the midst of these droughts. So yes, that's how food security happens.
So you're talking about not just making a difference in these 3 countries, but well beyond.
That's the breadbasket idea that you were asking David about. If we do it in a number of countries, we are not supporting just those countries. We are supporting millions of people in the corridor that actually needs this type of potential.
I'm going to come back to you, but Matthias, let me get you into this. So what is so interesting about this, and I want you to fill in the details, is, as Samantha and Jake have talked about, is this is crowding in the private sector. So we're very excited to hear this big announcement. How is Bayer playing and participating in the Accelerator?
Yeah, I think, first of all, we need a title change for administrator powers. I think orchestrator powers is the right way to call it in the future. This only works if we all work together. And I've seen you, Samantha, your team working tirelessly in bringing a lot of companies together. So I'm only one of the many companies, and also feel a bit to speak on behalf of all of these companies that invest in the food systems and in the rural communities in the 3 countries at question. And before I talk about what we are doing, I just want to remind all of us that half of all people who are currently living in Zambia, for example, are younger than 17 and a half years. If some of us think we are the baby boomers, we are wrong. Those baby boomers grow up at the moment in a totally different place, and they need our support, but they also need our trust in their ability to get shit done. And that's what I see when I go to Africa. I see a lot of young, female, male farmers who are actually entrepreneurs and who want to get stuff done. So what is our contribution? We're going to invest $35 million in a seed facility that produces modern seeds. This is a super strategic investment. The reason why it's a strategic investment is that it, first of all, is an off-taker for hundreds of farming communities who produce modern seeds, but it also produces the very seeds that double and then double again the production in the maize sector. I see Rob nodding. I think one of the important things, chief scientist, very important player in USAID, one of the important things the seed facility does is it gives access to the same innovation that farmers in Illinois, farmers in France, or farmers in Ukraine, and we talked about Brazil have. It's a window in giving really the most modern technology to farmers. And from my perspective, this is a really big deal. Why I believe it's a big deal? When the war in Ukraine broke out, what was one of the first targets of Russian cruise missiles? Our seed production in Ukraine. They missed the target, and now we are again able to export tons and tons and tons of corn into these kind of countries and help. But of course it's super strategic, and we are very honored to be part of it. The last thing I want to say is that next year is a high probability that we will have the same drought conditions in these countries we have this year. 7 out of 10 scenarios talk about the same kind of drought. So, Ambassador, I really appreciate what you said. We need to do both. We need to move in a direction of building the future, but we also need to make sure that there isn't despair today that would hinder our investment into the future. So, and this is, I think, what you are orchestrating, and I'm hugely grateful to be part of it and very humbled to represent many businesses who are going to invest in Africa in ways we haven't seen before.
Wow. What a win-win we're talking about. And I would add to your statistics, and Agnes, I want to ask you that we know that today, 1 in every 5 people who start looking for their first job is on the continent of Africa. By 2050, 1 in 3 workers in the world is going to be on the continent. So part of what we're talking about, and I think Matthias just set it up, is the accelerator is clearly about this regional breadbasket we're talking about, but it's really about the accelerator of the economy. And so, I think this is a perfect segue into what Matthias just talked about is this is about jobs, this is about education, this is about economic growth. And from your vantage point, how confident are you think this is gonna work to actually create the jobs and the economic growth in Africa, and how long will it take? I mean, we're all very excited about this, but give us the reality check here.
No, thank you. So part of the US-Africa Summit promise, remember in 2022 we had the US-Africa Summit. Part of that promise is actually what is being realized today here, launching an approach to corridors in Africa that brings several countries together to deal with the challenge of food security, but also to deal with the challenge of economic security. Recognizing the link between economic security and national security is a new thing we are hearing here today, which is extremely important. So for me, what gives me hope is this. One, that we do have a continent that is launching the whole new CAADP thing that really recognizes that we need to rally behind CAADP in new ways. We do have the Africa Free Continental Trade in place now as a mechanism of how we engage. And we do have the interest now from the US government that is beginning to lay real ground and show footprint on the ground that can start creating a blueprint for how we engage in these corridors on food security, on economic security, on creating jobs. Just to give an example, the South Corridor of Tanzania, which is also the US government through Feed the Future participated in, that corridor alone is creating 420,000 jobs. So we do more of that across the Biera corridor, across the Robito corridor. We take that further north into West Africa. We will create the jobs we are looking for. We will create the economic opportunities we are looking for. So that's the promise, and that's what the US-Africa relationship has to deliver. And I really appreciate that this is the first step in the right direction for me.
David, to get to this economic growth, what do we need from our partners in terms of the leaders of the government to make sure we get the economic growth?
And this is critical, and I see Earthen Cousin, who was my predecessor, sitting out there, who literally did such a great job, and we had an amazing transition because she understood the private sector's engagement. She understood that role, and so we built a great team at the World Food Program. But the humanitarian catastrophe that we're facing now, humanitarian aid is never going to be the long-term solution to food security. And I used to hear this question, Liz, whether it's at the Bundestag in Germany or whether it's in the Parliament of Canada or the UK or the United States Senate, House, Republicans and Democrats. Why should I send aid down to Guatemala or Chad when we've got funding issues right here in Alabama, in Texas, on education, health care, infrastructure, whatever it may be? I say, well, if you're not going to do it out of the goodness of your heart, strategic, effective international aid will do multiple things. It saves the American taxpayer dollars, and it's in your national security interest. And I would give not hypothetical, but true experiential information about, let me explain what happens when a family cannot feed their children. I've had more mothers in the Sahel, and I could go down to the Darien Gap, and I could go other places in the world, said, my husband, my son, my daughter didn't want to join Boko Haram or Al-Shabaab or ISIS or Al-Qaeda or the Taliban or the Houthis, but we hadn't fed our children in a couple of weeks. What were we supposed to do, Mr. Beasley? It wasn't like we could jump in a car and drive to Annapolis. They had to join because there was food or there was medicine. So when we don't provide strategic, effective aid, and this is what I love about the Accelerator, is strategic, effective aid that will grow the economies at the bottom. And when we do that type of aid, I'll just give you an example. In Niger alone, 80% of the villages where we had the flexibility with the funding to provide this type of program, they did not need additional support when COVID and when Ukraine hit. So what we're talking about here, engaging the private sector, because we're not going to solve this problem without the private sector being inspired and empowered and putting a guilt trip on them. I mean, it's critical. I don't mean just $1 million here, there. I'm talking about engaging and helping us in hunger, take ownership of these issues, and put the pressure on the analysts in Wall Street to give the flexibilities to have a longer runway, make maybe a little bit less money in that portfolio so we can end poverty around the world. It's doable.
And is it, that's an applause line. And is it doable to, the administrator talked about Ireland, to get not only the Congress here in the game, but worldwide? I mean, we got to ante up the game based on what you all are saying to get others in the game too.
Food security brings everybody together. It's absolutely unbelievable. I used to say it's the miracle, on Pennsylvania Avenue. We would bring that part of the White House to the Capitol, the D's and the R's coming together, and it's like they're fighting on everything. It's sun shining outside. Oh no, it's raining outside. But you come down and start talking about food security. The D's and the R's lay down their differences. The White House and the Congress lay aside their differences. But I think the American people and the people in the world, because the media is so distracted with so many other things, they need to understand that we are facing a global food crisis, and it's not just in the next 10, 15 years, it's in the next couple hundred years. And I'll tell you what Museveni told me one day in a private meeting. Museveni said to me, he says, Governor, he says, if Europe doesn't come to Africa, Africa's going to Europe. And what he was saying, if we don't bring the infrastructure and the programs in empowering the African people, because the young people in Africa, holy mackerel, I mean, they are ready to end poverty, to end the old ways of corruption. They're ready to move the country forward. And I think what Samantha's doing here, and Dean, I think, thank you, this is strategic. And Liz, obviously, you know how to bring all of us together, so thank you.
Well, Mateus, let me ask you one more question. One of the things that David has certainly taught me when he was at World Food Program is one of the things that is even making this worse is climate change. The Pentagon is always talking about the multiplier threat, that it is making a difference in terms of hunger, migration, health, exactly adding on to what we're doing. How is Bayer, how is the private sector, what role do they play in also addressing this in terms of the farmers on the ground as part of this accelerator work?
I think it's basically three things. So one is mitigation. Agriculture as a sector is still emitting a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. We also cut down more forests than we need to because we don't give access to modern agricultural tools. So mitigation, really important. Adaptation, even more important. And the good news when it comes to adaptation is, we heard about one of my favorite books and movies, Moneyball. Moneyball happens in seed production. We can produce seeds that adapt to new climate at a pace that was never there before, which gives me a lot of hope. But the one thing we can't do is, and that's why it's so important, we can't sell water. So the thing I'm most worried about is water. We need to make sure that we have water strategies. Water is this one molecule through which we all experience climate change. And then the third thing is access. It's incomprehensible for me that the people that haven't contributed to climate change are the ones that suffer the most. These people need access to modern technology, they need access to crop insurance, and they need access to our hearts. Those are the three things we need to manage. And I think we can do that. But one thing I want to say, though, is when we decided, after combining Bayer and Monsanto, to focus on an area both companies really didn't obsess about, on smallholder farmers, we weren't sure whether it's good business. The good news here is it's really good business. And we shouldn't only talk about the problems, we should talk about the opportunities. We don't invest because you guilt-tripped us, and boy, he guilt-trips us. Ursula sits on our supervisory board. She is even better at doing that, so I have quite a lot of that. We invest because we believe we will make money with that. And I'm unapologetic about it, because that's the only way for us to give Africa and many other regions the perspective they need.
Aren't the three of them inspiring? Let's give them a round of applause. Lucky us, we are going to end our program with two incredible bipartisan members from the House of Representatives. It's an honor to introduce the Representative Greg Meeks from the great state of New York, representing the 5th Congressional District. I think all of you probably know that Congressman Meeks demonstrates an unwavering commitment to America's global leadership, earning him the top Democratic position on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He's played a leadership role in not only shaping U.S. foreign policy, playing a leadership role in leading on the continent of Africa, but addressing the issues we've been talking about this morning on global hunger, on food security, and on spearheading the successful reauthorization of the Global Food Security Act. Please welcome Congressman Gregory Meeks.
Good morning. It is a good morning, especially when I walk in the House and I see Ambassador Powell and my good friend David Beasley. It's got to be a good morning when I see them because they always inspire me with the work that they do on a continuous basis, moving around, especially around the world, but especially on the continent of Africa, which is truly very important to me. And I want to thank USAID and for inviting me here today to mark the launch of the Feed the Future's new Accelerator effort in the Sub-Saharan Africa. Now, I got to tell you, so it is important to me. I just left Malaria No More, talking about the continent of Africa. I walk here to see all of you talking about the continent of Africa. Just last week at the Congressional Black Caucus, we had several different individuals there talking about the continent of Africa. I did an interview with, and I know Jake was supposed to be here, Jake Sullivan. He was here. I did an interview. Jake came to the Congressional Black Caucus last week, and we did a one-on-one interview. And the predominant conversation that we had was about the continent of Africa. So I think that we are going and moving in the right direction because when we put the youngest and the fastest growing continent on the planet up in the front burner, we are doing the right thing, and I want to thank each and every one of you for what you do every day, doing the right thing, helping those that are, in and need food, feeding them, humanity. That's what this is all about. So let me say to you that when we think about the acceleration, particularly in agricultural capacities and capabilities, and in the targeted countries of Malawi and Tanzania and Zambia, these countries were chosen based upon the data analysis that indicates we can unlock significant gains when we maximize the right conditions with the right partners. And that's what we're looking at, trying to put the right people together at the right time. So Feed the Future, was created some 15 years ago to respond to the need of greater investments in key countries' agricultural sectors so they may achieve long-term food security. And that's really important when you talk about climate change and where we're moving from that. But long-term key food security also equals economic success. And I was just, as I walked in, talking about it's good business also, and what we're talking about. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. No one wants to be dependent upon food aid to live. No one wants to do that. And food insecurity fuels broader instability when desperate people are exploited by bad actors or must migrate in search of nourishment. It causes the whole planet to not be balanced. And that is exactly why Feed the Future's upstream approach is absolutely critical. In the African context, this means working with small farmers who grow more than 2/3 of the region's food, but have been battling low crop yields, inconsistent irrigation, and the increasing impacts of climate change. And I hope everybody understands that the climate has changed. Not is changing, it has changed. but by leveraging partnerships with donors and the private sector, Feed the Future offers a range of interventions, such as seeds optimized for specific growing environments, modern agricultural techniques, connections to markets, and technical expertise to help shape policies that will enable the agricultural sector to grow from the bottom up. So to date, Feed the Future's approach has helped lift 23 million people out of poverty. And by concentrating resources and efforts on these 3 accelerator countries, where the governments are eager partners, prepared to make their own investments, and have policy reforms, they go hand in hand, the initiative can create a new regional breadbasket to support food security and stability. Almost immediately after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022, we witnessed dire negative impacts on global food security when Ukraine's wheat supplies were suddenly cut off by attacks on the shipping lanes. This hit wheat importing countries in the Horn of Africa especially hard. It required the United States and other donors to find emergency alternative sources of food to cover the gap. But it also made clear that the longer-term need for greater African production to stabilize the continent's food markets. Made it absolutely clear. That's what was necessary. So Feed the Future's work and these accelerator investments are critical parts of the long-term strategy to bolster food security on the continent of Africa. And as was indicated, one of the things that I'm so proud of is being a co-sponsor of the Global Food Security Reauthorization Act. As the lights go out and, it is. Look, one of the things when you get satisfaction, when it passed 2 years ago, it was one of the highlights for me, and I'll continue to support Feed the Future's vital mission because it's essential. And I'm eager to see the progress this accelerator initiative can achieve in partnership with Malawi and Tanzania and Zambia. And I'm grateful, again, to National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan for all the work that he has done. I'm grateful to Samantha Power. I got to tell y'all, look, I don't care where she is in the world. I don't care what time it is. When it's something that she thinks is needed and wants Congress to get through, my phone will ring or my text will happen and she will have it out. She'll have a speech that she had just given. Read the text of my speech. This is what we need to get done. Ambassador, I thank you. I thank you for being one of those that, you are untiring. And we all need to be untiring to make sure that we're getting the food and humanitarian care to people who need it. It benefits us. We become, all of us, beneficiaries because if we have food stability and security, it's better for everyone in the world. This world is much smaller today than it was 10, 15 years ago. And so therefore, we must make sure, as the pandemic showed, that we've got to take care and work collectively for all of humankind. Thank each and every one of you for what you do. I appreciate you. Let's continue to do the Lord's work. God bless you. God bless the United States.
Oh, thank you, Congressman Meeks. I think it's pretty appropriate that we are going to have as our final speaker a congressman who was born and raised on his family farm, Congressman Tracy Mann of Kansas, who knows firsthand how important farmers are to feed the world. His district is home to his alma mater in Kansas State University, which is not only recognized as one of America's top agriculture schools and leader in agricultural research, but is home to 4 Feed the Future innovative labs, 2 of which are here today. He's a member of the House Agricultural Committee. He is co-chair of the bipartisan House Hunger Caucus, and Congressman Mann spends a lot of time working to address global hunger and the issues we're talking about today. Please welcome Congressman T.C. Mann.
Good to see everybody. Thank you for having me, Minister Powell, David Beasley, great friends in this room. I did not realize that I was your last speaker this morning. So, okay? Oh, good. No, all good. So I live in a town called Salina, Kansas. So my district is the big first district of Kansas. If you look at a map, my district happens to be the exact center of the entire continental United States. It's actually this little town called Lebanon, Kansas, which I'm sure only a few of you have maybe ever heard of or been to. But when I think about my district in Kansas, it's kind of the pilot light for the nation. There's 435 districts in Congress. Mine would be the largest ag producing district in the whole country. We are number 1 out of 435 districts for beef production, number 1 for sorghum production, number 1 for wheat production, obviously used a lot of in food aid, other ag products as well. And so you have to ask yourself, when you're sitting in Kansas and you grew up on a farm like I did, what is the reason to care? Or in other words, why are these issues of importance? And I would give you 2 very quick thoughts, all with the vein and spirit of the importance of supporting these innovative labs that we're doing as we all try to feed the future. Thought number 1 is this. When you look at the history of our great country, we're about to celebrate our 250th birthday. We're 250 years into this great experiment of self-governance, which is the United States of America. But when you look at our country, why we have been the free, successful nation that we've been, there's a host of reasons, but one of which that's often overlooked, I believe, is if you just look at a map, and we were very blessed in our country. We won the lottery when we realized that the largest patch of farmland in the world, the most fertile patch of farmland on planet Earth, sits right in the middle of our country and is protected on the east by the Appalachian Mountains, on the west by the Rockies, the north by the Canadian tundra, and from the south, it's very hard to invade us and get to this farmland from the south. You got to, go through around a whole bunch of islands to try to make your way up to the Gulf, right? We won the lottery, right? The good Lord blessed us. And also, by the way, don't ever forget that the longest navigable waterway, not the longest river, but the longest navigable river in the entire world runs right through the largest patch of farmland in the entire world, right? Like this is a really big deal for us. One of the reasons that we have been the free country that we have been, because food security is national security, and we have never had to rely on any other country to feed ourselves, right? Big deal. Fast forward, we realized we have got to figure out how we maximize production in this part of the world. Hence our universities and this extension system that we have in our country, in many ways unique to America, came along, right? Incredible. Now we're to the point to really think through how do we help other parts of the world also maximize their production for their benefit like we've learned to do for our own, right? And it's pretty cool to think that right in our country, my district of Kansas, and there's other of these labs around the country, that we are helping other countries not to do it like we do it, but to really figure out how can they best do agriculture where they are from. You can't go to places like Kakumo, one of the largest refugee camps in the world, and not leave changed, right? That was my experience with my wife and I when we were there a year ago. And I will tell you, as a representative from the very center of the country, that I have never met a farmer, and by the way, I'm the first guy in my family in the last 130 years, either side of our family, to be in his 40s and not in production agriculture. Our family's always farmed. That's what we do. I mean, my dad, I literally tested him this morning. He's sitting on a combine right now harvesting corn with my brother. But I've never met a farmer in Kansas that doesn't wake up in the morning and have a sense that what they're doing feeds their neighbors, the rest of the country, and also a hungry world. And I can tell you, we cannot overlook the power of one major breakthrough at one of these labs or the impact that one person can have on global hunger around the world. A perfect example, and David Beasley certainly talked about this multiple times, and I'll close with this. There was a farmer from northwest Kansas, about as far north and west in Kansas as you can get, a county you probably have not heard of called Rollins County, named Peter O'Brien. Wheat farmer, 1950s, he had a bumper crop. He goes to his Farm Bureau meeting, his county Farm Bureau meeting with this idea. He said, I'm reading about people around the world that can't feed themselves. I've had a great crop. I'd like to figure out how to get some of my wheat to some of these mouths, other places that need it. And just, it was an idea. Floated it at a meeting, you know, at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night or whatever. That idea then caught fire and went to the state Kansas Farm Bureau later that year. Fast forward 18 months, this concept then was signed into a law by another Kansan named Dwight Eisenhower, and Food for Peace was born. So Food for Peace started with the idea of a farmer in my district, Peter O'Brien, one man who had an idea, how can I use my crops to help feed the world? And fast forward, and you realize how important that program has been and how many lives it has saved. And oh, by the way, the amount of goodwill that our country has around the world because of the aid that we are giving others. So I would just say this, it's an honor to get to be with you all. Thank you for what you're doing. It does matter. My hope is all of us, we are coming together and we are doing work, whatever our role is in that, that is going to literally feed and save the lives of people that we will never know or meet, but it's our responsibility to do that and do that to the utmost we possibly can. So thank you all for having me. Have a great day.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dina Esposito, and I lead the Bureau for Resilience, Environment, and Food Security at USAID, and I'm the Deputy Coordinator for Feed the Future. And my job is to thank all of you for coming and to thank all of our speakers and Liz for bringing this vision that we've been working on really for months, if not more than a year, to life. And just want to thank everybody in the room for the extraordinary partnership. It does take a village to end global hunger, but I do truly believe that it is actually one of the most solvable problems, daunting but solvable problems we have in the world today, because we have the skills, we have the know-how. We have to work smarter and we have to work collectively together, and that's what we've been talking about here. A very special thanks to Liz and her team for so ably running this operation this morning. Huge appreciation to members of Congress and all of their staff. Obviously, Feed the Future would not exist without your support and your vision behind what you want America to be, and we do our best every day to bring that vision to life. I really do want to also acknowledge, of course, that AID is a development partner. We are a supporting actor, and the lead role goes to the governments, and I want to thank you for your partnership and for the people of these countries who are on the front lines of the hunger crisis, the climate crisis, who make a difference. Every day we're here to work alongside you. The private sector, we could not have had a better advocate and speaker than our colleague from Bayer. Thank you for bringing that vision to life. Agnes, for coming from Africa to join us. I can't thank you enough. All of the speakers, really a huge appreciation. Administrator Power and Deputy Administrator Coleman, I don't think she's here. This idea, Feed the Future Accelerator, captured your imagination from the moment. You pushed us hard, you made it better, you brought it to life, and you brought all of these people together, and we are forever grateful, the whole rank and file of aid who work on this. You believed in us, you have our indebted gratitude, and the people of the continent and the world will thank you, and so thank you very much. Finally, just a word about the Feed the Future interagency team. It is a 12-agency and department agenda. All of them, I think many of them are here today. If you could stand up if you're part of the Feed the Future interagency team, please don't be shy. Stand up and be acknowledged. Yes. We work together on a regular basis, and we work not only on the Accelerator, but on so many different initiatives, the post-CADUP agenda, the country plans that we work